So, Arthur, I want to start out with a quote from your piece, which was a real runaway success, which I think tells us about the appetite to learn more about this topic. You said, "My professional life was going very well. I was the president of a flourishing Washington think tank, the American Enterprise Institute. I had written some best-selling books. People came to my speeches. My columns were published in the New York Times. But I had started to wonder, can I really keep this going?" I want to understand what prompted you to ask that question.
That was about 4.5 years ago, and things were going pretty well in my life, in my professional life. I've been always happy in my family life, thank goodness. But at that time, I was traveling a lot, and I had this experience where I was on a plane at night, and it was dark, and I heard a couple behind me. I could tell by their voices they sounded like an elderly couple behind me, and I couldn't quite make out the man's words, but I could hear the woman's words. I assumed that they were a married couple. I just made this assumption, and I heard him mumble, 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 and then she said, "Oh, don't say it would be better if you were dead." I thought, ooh. And then I was kind of morbidly fixed on this. I was listening. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help it. And it went on like this for 20 minutes. No, it's not true that you have nothing to add. It was going on and on and on. It's like, wow. And I got a little biography. I'm a social scientist, and so I sort of tell stories. And I got a little biography of him into my head. This is somebody who's probably disappointed with how his life has turned out, maybe the businesses he didn't start, or the education he didn't pursue, or the promotions he didn't get. And his wife is consoling him. And the lights went on. We landed at Dulles Airport in Washington, and everybody stood up, and I turned around. He was one of the most famous men in America. This was somebody I have idolized since I was a kid. And I don't know him, but everybody knows him. And we were walking up the aisle, and my mind is blown, because, this is what I'm sort of do for a living. And I'd gotten it wrong. And I heard people saying, there's, so-and-so, there's so-and-so. We got to the door, and, the pilots I was standing there saying, "Thanks for flying United, folks." You know how they all talk like Chuck Yeager? And he looks past me, of course, because who am I? And he looks at the guy, the hero, the American hero on the plane. He said, "Sir, you've been my hero since I was a little boy." And he was beaming. I turned around, because I said, and I thought to myself, so who's the real one? That guy that I'm looking at right now, or the guy 20 minutes ago telling his wife he wished he were dead? And I started a research project. Why? Because I wanted to know why that happened and how I could avoid it. Look, I'm no hero on the plane. I'm no big shot like that. But I've tried to do a lot with my life, and so have you. Every single one of you in this room, you've given your all to use what you've got. And at some point, decline is inevitable, because that's how life works. How can I not suffer like that? Is it inevitable I'm going to suffer? Just like it's going to be inevitable that I get old if I'm lucky? I have bad demographics in my family. The truth is that I might only have 3 or 4 years left if I follow my family patterns. But I go to the gym every day, so maybe I get 40. The bottom line is, what can I do? Is there a strategy? So I started a research project for my own edification, and I worked on it for 4 years, and I came up with I think I found the answer, and I showed it to a couple of people and said, "You gotta write this for the Atlantic." So I did, and it has the answers as I see them, and it was read about 2 million times in the first couple of weeks, and then I signed a contract and a book for it, which I now, signing a contract for a book is like handcuffing yourself to a pipe in the basement, because, now I have to do that. And I have to say, I have never had so much satisfaction as being able to help a lot of people, like I think that this work might do and has done so far.
So when you say professional decline, what does that look like? What does it feel like?
So professional decline is basically a diminution of abilities, and it's completely normal. Here's the thing, though. You don't notice it if you never do very much. So the people who don't suffer very much are the people who are like, whatever. This hurts. This doesn't hurt, right? And so therefore, you get this paradox. I kept seeing in the data that the people who suffer the most from professional decline are the people who are the most accomplished. It's crazy. There are these 2 psychologists at the University of Texas, Austin, Carol and Charles Holohan. They're a married couple. And they have found that people who are identified early in life as the most gifted and go on to do amazing things, they're the most depressed when they're 80. It turns out, I say, why is that? Why is it? It's what I call in the article, the law of psycho-professional gravitation. If you go up high, you're going to notice it when you're not there anymore. And so therefore, we need some strategies that the ordinary, conventional strategies of simply raging against the decline. We have to find some way to turn it, if we can, turn it into a source of transcendence. Maybe an opportunity to live a new part of life, make it into something good. Is it possible? That was my question.
So I think people have this sense, part of the premise of this article and the thing that I think really stuck with people was the idea that exactly what you just described is going to happen sooner than they think. And I think people have this sense, especially people who are very accomplished, people who find a lot of meaning in their work, that they're going to hit this stride, this professional stride, and they're going to keep going up, and they're going to hit kind of their top level, they're going to plateau, they're going to stay there, they're going to hit retirement, they're going to retire, they're going to go off into the sunset. Maybe if you have been successful in this morning's panel of saving for retirement, I don't know, you're going to Europe every other week, good for you. And like that is your life.
Yeah.
But the whole premise was, hey, that decline, that come down that you just talked about is happening sooner.
Yeah.
So sooner than 65. When is it happening?
Well, it depends on the profession. And the bottom line is in almost every profession, it's sooner than you think. I mean, we all know, look, if you're doing something intensely physical, you can't keep it up. If you're a linebacker in the NFL, if you're doing something that, I mean, nobody thinks that you're going to see a basketball player who's 45 years old who's still in perfect shape. But most of us think who make our living from ideas, because we're at the vanguard of the ideas economy, you, me, everybody in here. I mean, this is our trade. The coin of the realm is thinking for us. Well, that's not going to go anyplace, right? And in point of fact, there's a whole industry for saying you never have to get worse at anything. Better next year, that's the title of a book, right? There's a huge part of medical science that's dedicated to making sure that men my age can get more and more and more ripped. You see these ads in the back of the airline magazine of a guy's like grandpa's head and Mr. Universe's body. And like, what is up? That's Photoshopped. No, it turns out it's not. It's just it's denying the reality that decline is a normal part of living. And when you deny any part of living, you deny yourself part of your life. You're not fully alive. I mean, that's a central insight. It's a truism. It's not just Buddhism or religion. It's axiomatic. And so therefore, we have no choice, if we're true to ourselves, but to try to recognize the truth and then to face the reality and then to try to turn it into something that's better and more transcendent.
I have a few more questions for Arthur, but I do want to let everyone in the audience know we will be taking questions from you as well. So start logging into Slido and putting those questions in. There are also people running with comment cards. So if you do not want to use the phone or do not use Slido, you can grab a comment card. So how do we accept that? What is the thing that happens where you can accept that decline is going to happen no matter what, and that it may be painful with grace? It seems like you have to be in a particular mindset that not a lot of people are in. Yeah, well, the first thing to keep in mind is that you have a success curve if you're trying to be incredibly accomplished, and that it's not your only curve. You can get on another curve and continue to go up, and this is one of the central insights. It gets back to social psychology in the early 1970s. There was a British psychologist named Raymond Cattell who did important work on the two types of intelligences that we typically see, fluid and crystallized. Fluid intelligence is what got you to where you are in terms of your accomplishment. It's analytic capacity, it's cognitive horsepower, it's the ability to solve problems faster than other people and come up with ideas brilliantly. But that's not the only kind of intelligence. In point of fact, that starts to diminish in your 30s, and it goes down quickly in your 40s, which is the reason that you'll see that lawyers, when they're 45 or 50 years old, they'll be super depressed frequently because the young associates in their firm are solving things faster. And it's like, I'm just losing my edge. Maybe I'm bored. I don't know what it is. No. That's fluid intelligence in decline. Here's the good news. Crystallized intelligence, which is based on the stock of knowledge, not the flow of knowledge, that increases through your 40s and your 50s and your 60s, and it stays high through your 70s and 80s, also known as wisdom. There was a long time when people thought that the reason you have a harder time coming up with names when you're getting older is because there's some structural deficit in the brain. That turns out to be almost certainly wrong. The mind, the brain, works like a library, and as you get older, it's a bigger and bigger library. So when you're a kid, my kids are in their early 20s, and I ask them to recall a fact, well, they got like 6 books behind the counter, right? You ask me, I got to send the librarian to the back of the stacks to look it up. And, she's not that fast. So this is the important thing to keep in mind. Now, this also has a huge lesson in it because the library has space, and you can fill it with junk or you can fill it with good stuff.
The argument about asking your kids to read more books and play fewer video games might very well be that whatever, or watching less TV, is that whatever you do is going to go into your library. And you're going to have a whole bunch of easy-at-hand references when you're 78 years old to, sitcoms that we all watched in the 70s. That's pretty depressing. Read more books, because that's what's going to go into the library and enhance your crystallized intelligence, your wisdom. That's your teaching ability, your synthetic ability, your ability to explain things. So stop trying to write the seminal paper or come up with a brilliant new idea. Move to teaching people, to becoming a mentor, and to synthesizing ideas into meta ideas that people can understand. That's your comparative advantage, and young people can't touch you if you do that right.
So
yeah. Let's hear it for old people. Yeah.
So you kind of been putting your money where your mouth is here,
yeah.
And you left your job at AI and have moved on to Harvard,
right.
And you are working on the book, obviously. Do you have any regrets? Has there been any part of you that says, maybe I could have eked out a couple more years doing what I was doing?
Yeah, I have a lot of regrets. It was fun being the president of AEI. And walking away, here's the hard part. It's one thing to know these things to be true, but look, friends, walking away is hard. Walking away, but here's the truth. When you're talking about the height of your professional accomplishment, at least the first curve, the fluid intelligence curve, you have two choices. You can leave before you're ready, or you can leave on somebody else's terms. I know which one I want. I don't want to leave on somebody else's terms. I don't want to find people going, hey, Brooks kind of lost his edge. I don't know. I think somebody's got to go talk to that old guy. I don't want that to happen, but partly because I love my organization. I love the people I was working with. They deserve the very best. So I made the plan. I announced it 16 months in advance, and I did what my research told me to do, which is go teach, go write books about synthetic ideas. And I got to tell you, I'm in a new job for 3 months. I'm 55 years old. It's brutal. It's brutal. There's a lot of research that shows that if you change jobs and careers and cities all at one time, it has the same dislocating cognitive impact as losing to death somebody in your immediate family. Here's the problem with that. When you do what I did, everybody's going like, congratulations, man, you get a great run at AEI, now you're a professor at Harvard. And I feel like I'm like in the deep state, like stage 4 of grief. That's important to keep in mind. Knowledge is power on these things, and part of it has to do with serotonin differences and all that. But it's also really hard because I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to scale up. I used to be a college professor, but that was a long time ago. I'm trying to scale up in this, and so it's hard. Pray for me.
All right, we're going to start going to some audience questions. This is the first one from Susan. Is the decline intrinsic to the individual or to the forces, ageism, et cetera, around the individual?
So is decline intrinsic to the individual or to forces such as ageism around the individual? Almost certainly both in many cases. However, one of the things that I have found is that there's a lot of reverse ageism in certain industries. There are a lot of people, I had every incentive to keep going and going and going and going and going because most people didn't believe that I was they saw that I didn't think I was in decline, and they were like, what are you, crazy? And I was the ageist one. I was the one who was pushing myself. I fired me. So there is a structural change in fluid intelligence. You need to find an opportunity to get on your crystallized intelligence. And by the way, this article and this book have a ton of stuff about other things to do, about simplifying your life and understanding the essence of your death and playing to your own weaknesses to connect yourself to other individuals and connecting your roots with others. I need more time to do that as well.
All right, next question. You mentioned decline a lot. Can you speak about reinvention? What if we approached it as reinvention and not trying to be stuck in what was?
Yeah, that's exactly right. When I talk about the decline, I'm talking about the decline on the first curve. Reinvention is getting on the second curve. That's what I'm doing right now. I'm in this process of reinvention, and on my best days, I'm kind of enjoying it.
I do wonder, as we think about corporate structure, is there something that fundamentally needs to change? I think in the early stages of your career, you're feeling a ton of competition with people who are older than you. And then when you're at later stages, you are both feeling competitive with the people who are younger than you and worried about being pushed out. And then on the back end of it, we now have a situation where people who would once retire and maybe find fulfillment in that are working a lot longer and trying to find these second stages. So is there just a fundamental reshaping in how we think about work and the meaning of work in our lives, especially as people live longer?
Yeah, there certainly is. And part of that has to do with the fact that we just can't, I just ran a big public policy think tank for a long time. We cannot afford to have people retiring at 65. We just actuarially, it's insane that we have a Social Security system that we're unwilling to reform, and where people can start retiring at 62 or 65 or 67, depending on how you do it, and then if you live to 65 and you're in decent health, the expectation is you're going to live to 83 today. I looked at actuarial tables, and given how much I exercise and the fact that I don't eat meat, I'm going to live to like 1,000, right? It's like unhappily, by the way, which is not a good thing. We have to keep working as a public policy matter, but the truth is that we can afford to, and we can actually get some juice out of it personally, and we can enjoy it, but it takes a couple of things to keep in mind. We need to work with two characteristics. Work where we can earn our success and we can accomplish something and we're not feeling this decline, and number two, where we can serve others. Those are the two characteristics of work that actually brings enduring joy. And unless you get on your crystallized intelligence curve when you're 65 or 70 years old, you're going to be experiencing, and for many of us, we would be experiencing an exercise in futility. So that's how we have to think about it. The other thing to keep in mind, by the way, I was doing a talk for a big Silicon Valley firm for the employees a few months ago, and inevitably came up the issue of workforce diversity, because they have a lot of problems with that all over the economy, but especially in Silicon Valley. A lot of engineers, and I know what they were talking about. They were talking about race and gender. But then I said, you want to talk about a little bit about diversity? How many old people work with you? And they're like, you mean like 30? And the truth of the matter is, the most important thing that a lot of these companies which are struggling, you remember when there was the iconic companies that everybody admired and the entrepreneurs that everybody wanted to be, and now they're freaking out because people are going like, actually, you're weird and you're selfish and we don't admire you as much. And the companies are having trouble with their workforces and all that. The most important thing they could do is have 70-year-olds in there. Why? Because 70-year-olds have had every problem, have solved everyone's like, I saw that in 1965, right? Let me tell you what to do. This is how human dynamics work. Like, I can't figure out your computer system, I don't care. But I can figure out the human beings around this place. And until they actually get around the age diversity issue, we're going to continue to see a bunch of avoidable, unforced errors. All
right, the next question is one that I doubt we'll get an answer, but when you get asked a lot, who's the famous person?
Yeah, I can't tell you that because I just like I don't want to be sued. Yeah. But also it would be indiscreet. Yeah. And it could be anybody. I mean, the point is, it could be you, it could be me. The greatest fortune that we could have is to be the hero on the plane, and the greatest misfortune is to squander that joy that comes from it by trying to keep the heroism alive decades past its pull date. And that's the point of it. I mean, I listed the people that I know who it is, obviously. I listed the people that could be, and I came up with it. I stopped the list at 50 that would actually fit these characteristics. And the truth is, a lot of them are really suffering a lot.
Well, I think that's the perfect place to end this. Everyone, please join me in thanking Arthur for his time.